The Mayan calendar is the most accurate calendar ever discovered on Earth. And humanity is intrigued how an ancient tribal people could be so precise, more precise than modern man and all of his technologies. Now humanity is looking to the Maya to understand this date of December 21st, 2012, that is emphasized within the Mayan calendar. And the Maya have responded. What higher source that is more respected than the president of the National Mayan Council of Elders of Guatemala, all 440 Mayan tribes representing this primary leader of the Mayan nation in Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, and Guatemala? His name is Don Alejandro Cerrillo Perez. Today, I will translate into the language of the modern world what the Mayan people themselves have to say about 2012. And if I err, I'm sure the Mayan Council will let both of us know, but they did give me authority to speak. Just so you understand the source of what I'm about to say, I will quickly explain the National Mayan Council of Elders of Guatemala and who they are. There are 440 tribes living in Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and Guatemala, and each of these tribes has one elected elder for that tribe. These 440 elders make up the Mayan Council of Elders centered in Guatemala. Then this council elects one member of the council to preside over the whole council and the Mayan nation, and this is Don Alejandro Cerrillo. He is a 13th generation Mayan shaman. Don Alejandro knows more about the Mayan people and culture than probably anyone on Earth. To be clear, there are other Mayan councils, such as the Grand Itza Mayan Council that I talked about before, associated with Hunzvatsman, also a Mayan priest and shaman, but living in Mexico and in the lowlands. This council is another primary council, but represents mostly the Mexican Maya. I have worked with and performed ceremony with this council also for many years, which I talked about before, and the work that they do is also very important for the world. And then there are smaller councils that are located all around in Belize and Honduras and other places that are mostly regional and meet the needs of people who are usually more remote. In July of 2007, Don Alejandro and his wife Elizabeth came to Sedona, Arizona, where I live, to meet with me. They wanted to tell me about some of the Mayan prophecies and to ask for assistance in these prophecies. Why me? Well, I can't really tell you, except that, like I said, I've been working with them for a long time, and I think they trust me. The first thing that Don Alejandro told me was that everything we have read, heard, or seen about the Mayan culture and the Mayan calendar was not approved or written by the Mayan people or any of the councils, and therefore not spoken by the Mayan people. What we have learned from the Mayans has come from the universities and governments and religions and archaeologists and ordinary people like Jose Aguilas, and some of who are Mayan. But to be very clear, the National Mayan Council of Elders of Guatemala, according to Don Alejandro, has not said one word in 527 years. That's a very long time of silence. So you can see why the Maya breaking their silence at this time should be of great importance to the world. And further, everything that we now know about the Maya has to be put aside so we can hear the truth, not a truth made up by outsiders who are simply guessing or are living a consciousness that has almost nothing to do with the Maya. Here's what Don Alejandro told me about the Mayan prophecy of 2012. First of all, he said there is a window of time around this date, December 21st, 2012, the Mayan call the end of time. It is about 7 or 8 years in duration. This window began, as I understand it, on October 24th, 2007, but I have not been told the exact date it would end. But for certain, at this moment, we are all now living in this window called the end of time. Don Alejandro also said that the likelihood that the Mayan prophecy would begin on that date of December 21st, 2012, as most people in the world believe, is extremely unlikely. He simply said it would begin somewhere in the window of the end of time, which means any minute from now, and could begin as late as 2015. This is something that none of the prophecies that the modern world is talking about is saying. There is another indigenous tribe of the United States called the Hopi. The academia believes that this tribe came across the Bering Strait from Russia over to Alaska and then walked down the coast of Canada and eventually migrated to where they are now in northern Arizona. But according to Grandfather Eric, a member of the Hopi Council and the historian for the tribe, he's actually the last living member of this particular part of the tribe, that this is not true. The Hopi did not come in that way. They came from Guatemala. And at that time, when they left from Guatemala, they were Mayan, not Hopi. And the Mayans sent them forth north for reasons that are still hidden by the Maya and the Hopi. But the fact that the Hopi were originally Maya was acknowledged before me by both tribes. I actually sat and listened to them as they told me this whole thing. And in November of 2007, Grandfather Eric and I were riding in a bus in Guatemala, sitting beside each other and talking. And Grandfather Eric asked me if I saw the blue sphere in the sky on October 24th, 2007. I told him I didn't actually see it, but that my daughter saw it and watched it as it happened. I told him I saw it on the internet, but I didn't see it. He said, "Could this be the blue star prophecy that was prophesied over 200 years ago by our tribe?" You know, I didn't know the answer to that. I wasn't Hopi. But here's what happened. Just before October 24th, 2007, a comet named Holmes came into our solar system, a very small, fast-moving comet. No scientist thought too much of this cosmic event. It wasn't a big deal. But then on October 24th, 2007, this comet exploded and rapidly became a huge blue sphere in the sky, expanding and expanding until it became larger than the sun. It is now recorded as the largest object ever observed in our solar system. And so as I understand it, when Grandfather Eric arrived back home in Hopi land, the Hopi Council met and it was agreed upon that this blue sphere was the blue sphere prophecy of the Hopi. It was rapidly accepted all over the North and South America, and it was also accepted by the Maya as the beginning of the end of time. So this is how this came about, this period of end of time. It wasn't just a random event or some little thing. It was one of the biggest events that ever have occurred in our solar system that we know of ever. Now, when Don Alejandro was in Sedona, Arizona in July of 2007, he gave part of the Mayan prophecy, one item. And there are many, many more. And he said that what he said, and this is Mayan prophecy, definitely, he said that there would be a physical pole shift of the Earth's axis sometime within the end of time. Now, this is nothing new. Since Edgar Cayce gave this same prophecy long ago in the 1930s or so, perhaps I should simply say that they agree. And Cayce said that sometime after the winter of 1998, the axis of the Earth would shift to a new location, and he even gave the exact location of where he predicted the axis would move to a very specific point inside of Russia, approximately 16 degrees from where it is now. Considering that Edgar Cayce gave about 12,000 predictions from 1920s to 1970 and was only wrong on one small prediction, he gave a reading while he was in the United States on a man in France and reached his twin brother by mistake. Edgar Cayce's predictions are among the most accurate in the world. And modern science has been intensely watching this possibility of a pole shift. A physical pole shift always begins with a magnetic pole shift first. And science has noted that the magnetic field of the Earth has begun to weaken about 2,000 years ago. And then about 500 years ago, there was a dramatic shift in the strength of the magnetic field as it became weaker and weaker. Then about 40 years ago or so, the magnetic field began to change in ways where the magnetic lines that had been more or less fixed for a long, long time began to wander. This resulted in the whales that used these lines to migrate began to beach themselves on land, something we'd never seen before. The magnetic lines changed from their established positions, and some of them now entered into land masses which never had before. No one had ever seen whales this before, and no one had ever seen the magnetic lines change like this before either. Then the birds began to show up in locations that were not part of their migration patterns, again, because the Earth's magnetic lines were changing. And they were changing because the Earth's magnetic field was getting weaker and weaker. In the 1990s, the astronomical maps of the world, the aeronautical maps of the world used for landing airplanes at the airports had to be changed worldwide because of the old ones were simply not valid anymore. And today the magnetic lines are so unreliable, the magnetic maps have to be checked every single time a plane lands to make sure that their guidance systems are functioning properly. In 2003, a television special came out of Nova, which gave a team of scientists the airtime to begin to talk about the possibility of a magnetic pole shift. These scientists felt that Earth's magnetic poles will shift sometime in the near future and that it was imminent. And then a little less than 2 years ago, the world scientists who observed the Earth's magnetic fields went onto the internet to warn the world. They were given 11 days before the government shut them down and wouldn't let them keep talking, probably because they were afraid that people would be too concerned. What the scientists said was that there were so many anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field that they believed that within 25 years the magnetic fields of the Earth would not only move, but would switch its polarity, meaning that the North Pole would become the South Pole and the opposite. Then about 8 or 9 months ago, these same scientists went back on the internet and made an even stronger warning. They said that the anomalies had become so great that they were expecting the possibility of a magnetic pole shift any minute. What science knows as fact is that about 13,000 years ago, there was a physical pole shift. The pole shift coincided with the other end of where we are right now in the precession of the equinoxes, which would be about 13,000 years ago, exactly on the opposite end of this cycle from where we are right now. They believe that Hudson Bay was the site of the North Pole before this axis shifted. Then a little less than 26,000 years ago, at exactly the very point we happen to be within at this moment in the precession of the equinoxes, the end of time, where we are right now, close to December 21st, 2012, the Earth's physical poles shifted a second time. And if that is not shocking enough, what science knows is that when the Earth's physical axis shifts to a new location, it only takes 20 hours, less than 1 day. This is not the Mayans saying this. This is the scientific world has documented this. You wake up one morning, and in a single day, your world is completely transformed. But back to the magnetic poles. What science has also noticed is that directly before the Earth's physical pole shift, there is always a magnetic pole shift, followed by a period of no magnetic fields. It is shut down completely. What is now only a theory, because of modern man has never been alive modern man anyway, has never witnessed this kind of thing. But this theory is the only theory that comes to really explain how this is possible. If you think about it, the Earth is massive, and that to change the axis of the Earth would require a huge amount of energy. And that's almost impossible. Scientists have never been able to figure this out of how this is possible. The amount of energy would be just, it would be like the moon hitting the Earth, something of this kind of level. And then, so how can the Earth possibly move its axis somewhere? The amount of energy that would take is just stupendous. It would be as though a moon had hit the Earth, or something of that nature would take place. But it doesn't. The Earth has shifted its axis hundreds and hundreds of times over the last few 100 million years. And so science could never figure this out. They didn't know how this was possible. And then a theory came up recently, not very long ago, 20, 30 years ago, I believe. And the theory was this. There is a crust on the Earth. It's only 20, 30, 40 miles thick. It's not very thick. And underneath that is called the mantle. And there's an upper mantle, which is that connects the crust to the inner part of the Earth. And this upper mantle is made out of rock. However, what the scientists have discovered is that if the magnetic field of the Earth goes to zero, disappears completely, which is what they expect to happen very soon, then after about 2 weeks, this rock formation that is all around the Earth turns to a liquid. It's like oil. And so now the outer crust of the Earth is completely free to spin in any direction it wants. And so it would still take a great amount of energy to move that, but nothing like it would require to move the entire Earth to a new axis. And so, how do I say this? What they believe is going to happen is you now go to the South Pole, and the ice on the South Pole is not perfectly centered. It's off center. It's a massive amount of ice, miles, about 2.5 miles high or so. It's a huge amount of ice. In fact, if that ice were to melt, it would raise the oceans, the entire world's oceans, I believe, close to 200 feet. It's a lot of water. And so that mass, when the surface of the Earth, the crust of the Earth is now free to rotate, it's off center. And they believe it will move toward the center of balance, and when it does, the crust moves with it. So the world scientists have now calculated where they believe, they have predicted where they believe the axis of the Earth is going to go, which is almost identical to Edgar Cayce. Interesting enough. Edgar Cayce says it'll be 16 degrees into Russia in this particular place, and the mathematical scientists have calculated about 17 degrees into Russia, into almost exactly the same place. And so if it's true, we don't know, but this is a theory. Nobody has ever seen this happen. At least no modern man has. Now, the shifting of the poles of the axis, however it is to take place, it is this world that the Maya wish to speak to you about, for they know it well. They remember their past, and they remember both of these pole shifts that science has recorded in recent times. According to the Maya, they lived through both of them, and they have been on Earth for at least 26,000 years. Science cannot contradict that because they don't know where they came from and they don't know anything about them. But according to Don Alejandro, in the last pole shift, millions of people died simply because they didn't understand what was happening. If they only knew and understood the situation, they could have easily transformed their experience into something of strength and grace and beauty. But Don Alejandro says that if they don't understand what is occurring and enter into fear, they can easily die. And so he wants to talk to you about this. Don Alejandro also speaks about 30 hours of darkness that happens at this moment when the poles shift. There are some people out there, I'm aware, that speak about 3 days of darkness. The Mayans say no, it's not 3 days, it's 30 hours. He says that, Don Alejandro says, that everything goes black and one cannot even see the stars at night. Or in other words, we go blind. He says it is during this period that so many people died because of fear that entered into their experience. But he also says that if one were to not worry and simply stay still and just relax, everything returns back, your sight comes back, everything returns to normal, and it only takes 30 hours. So this is another thing that the Mayan people want you to understand is during this change, don't go into fear. It's nothing to be afraid of. But of course, after the pole shift, where you are located on the surface of the Earth is now probably completely different relative to the equator than before the shift began. You are now probably living in a new and different environment located on the Earth. And this must immediately be evaluated. You've got to figure out where you are, or you could die just from extreme cold or extreme heat. This is another thing he wanted you to know. Now, one piece of the Mayan prophecy that has been told, which the world calls doomsday, but there is something far more important. How do we understand how to be during a physical pole shift and directly afterwards? For the Maya, it is a vibration that comes from within your heart. And this vibration is in perfect resonance to the heart of the earth, the heart of the sun, and the heart of the universe. If we learn to live within this vibration, the living earth will make certain that we extend ourselves into the new world.